The world we inhabit is a shadow of its former self. Today, a lone human can walk across vast landscapes with a calculated confidence, the fear of predation, a distant, primal whisper. But this security is a recent, fragile invention. To understand humanity, we must travel back through the mists of time to an era when our ancestors were not masters of the earth, but a fledgling species of prey, fighting for a precarious foothold in a world ruled by giants. This was the Pliocene and Pleistocene, an epoch of titans, a grand and terrible stage upon which the first act of the human story was written not in ink, but in the blood and terror of the hunted. Imagine an Africa not of curated safari parks, but of immense unbroken wilderness. The climate shifts, the great forests of the Miocene recede, and a new dominant ecosystem is born, the savanna. It is a sea of grass, punctuated by acacia trees and hidden watercourses. This open environment is a landscape of opportunity, but also one of profound exposure. For the small bipedal hominins venturing out from the relative safety of the dwindling woodlands, there is nowhere to hide. This is the world of Australopithecus afarensis, the family of the famous fossil Lucy. Standing little more than a meter tall, with a brain capacity only marginally larger than a modern chimpanzee's, they are an experiment of evolution. Their bipedalism, a revolutionary adaptation, frees their hands and allows them to see over the tall grasses. Yet this upright posture also makes them conspicuously visible, slow and soft-bodied targets, in a land teeming with specialized killers. These were not the predators of our modern world. The forces of natural selection had sculpted beasts of a scale and ferocity that are difficult for the modern mind to comprehend. This was their kingdom, and our ancestors were merely tenants living on borrowed time. Death wore many faces, and each was more terrifying than the last. It came on four paws on silent wings, and from the murky depths of the water that gave them life. The most iconic of these ancient hunters were the saber-toothed cats. The very name evokes images of prehistoric power. Species like Meganterion and Homotherium patrolled the African plains long before the more famous North American Smilodon. These were not simply cats with long teeth, they were biomechanical marvels of lethality. Meganterion, often called the dirk-toothed cat, was a compact, immensely powerful ambush predator. Built more like a bear than a modern leopard, its forelimbs were disproportionately muscular, designed for grappling and pinning struggling prey. Its signature canines were not for slashing, as once thought, but for a swift, precise killing bite. After wrestling its victim to the ground, it would use its powerful neck muscles to drive the canines deep into the soft throat, severing major blood vessels and the windpipe. For an Australopithecine, an encounter with a Meganterion lurking in the scrub would be over in a terrifying instant. The silence of the savannah would be broken by a brief struggle, and then silence again. Slightly different in its approach was Homotherium, the scimitar-toothed cat. Its body was built for pursuit, with longer legs and a slightly sloping back, somewhat like a hyena. Its canines, while still enormous, were shorter, broader, and more serrated, like steak knives. This suggests a different hunting strategy, a wound and weight approach, inflicting deep, bleeding gashes that would eventually incapacitate its prey. A troop of hominins might successfully fend off an initial attack, only to watch one of their own slowly bleed out, the relentless cat shadowing them from a distance. The psychological terror of such a predator, one that did not need to win the fight in the first minute, would have been immense. But the felines were not the only terror on the ground. The modern spotted hyena is a formidable carnivore, but its Pleistocene ancestor Pachycracuta brevirostris was a beast of a different order entirely. This was the giant short-faced hyena, the largest hyena ever to have lived. Standing a meter at the shoulder and weighing as much as a modern lioness, it possessed a skull and jaw of terrifying power. Its molars were vast, conical bone-crushing instruments, and its jaw muscles could generate a bite force capable of pulverizing the largest skeletons to get at the marrow within. Unlike the often solitary saber-tooths, Pachycracuta likely hunted in formidable clans. A pack of these giants would have been an unstoppable force, capable of running down prey over long distances, stealing kills from any other predator, and utterly demolishing a carcass, leaving nothing behind. For our ancestors, the giant hyena was not just a predator, it was a direct and devastating competitor. If a hominin group managed to find a dead animal, or even drive a predator off its kill, they would be in a frantic race against time. The scent of blood would travel on the wind, and soon the whooping calls of the giant hyena clan would echo across the plains. The hominins would have had mere minutes to grab what they could before being overwhelmed by these bone-crushing behemoths. Fossil sites across Eurasia and Africa attest to their efficiency, containing vast middens of splintered bones from every creature imaginable. The evidence suggests that hyena dens were places of systematic dismemberment, and among the bones of antelope and horse, tragically, hominin remains have been found bearing the unmistakable marks of hyena gnawing. The danger was not confined to the open plains. Life depended on water, and every riverbank, every lake shore was a potential death trap. Here lurked ancient crocodilians, apex ambush predators that have changed little in their fundamental design for millions of years. At Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, a place rich with the remains of our ancestors, Homo habilis and Homo erectus, scientists unearthed the fossils of a truly terrifying beast, Crocodilus anthropophagus. The species name is a deliberate, chilling choice. It means man-eating crocodile. Larger and more robust than today's Nile crocodile, this monster possessed prominent horns above its eyes. It would lie in wait, perfectly still, only its nostrils and eyes breaking the surface of the murky water. For a hominin coming to drink, the world could narrow to a sudden explosion of water and an unyielding grip. Dragged beneath the surface, there was no escape. The necessity of water was a daily gamble with a horrifying predator that embodied the raw reptilian power of a bygone age. The remains of a hominin foot and hand, found at the same site, bear its tooth marks, a silent 2-million-year-old testament to a fatal encounter at the water's edge. Even the sky was not safe. In our modern world, the idea of a bird of prey hunting humans is the stuff of folklore. But in the Pleistocene, it was a terrifying reality. The discovery of the tongue child in 1924, a fossilized skull of a young Australopithecus africanus, provided the first chilling evidence. The skull bore peculiar puncture marks and fractures around its eye sockets. For decades, their origin was a mystery. Then close analysis by paleontologists revealed that the marks were a perfect match for the talons and beak of a large eagle. These were not the marks of a scavenger pecking at a carcass, but the unmistakable signature of a fatal predatory strike. The eagle, perhaps a species similar to the African crowned eagle, which today preys on monkeys, would have swooped down from the sky, its primary target being the vulnerable young of the hominin group. The terror must have been unimaginable, a threat that could come from any direction, with no warning but the rush of air and a fleeting shadow on the ground. For early hominins, the open spaces of the savannah were an aerial hunting ground, and their children were the prey. In this crucible of fear, our ancestors were forced to change or perish. They had no great claws, no armor, no thick hide, and no speed to outrun the dedicated sprinters of the savannah. Their survival, and our very existence, depended on a different set of tools that were invisible, yet more powerful than any tooth or claw. The first and most fundamental was the group. An individual hominin was a meal. A coordinated group was a formidable challenge. Living in social bands provided a network of eyes and ears. While some foraged, others could watch, creating a perimeter of vigilance. In the face of a predator, a group could mount a collective defense, shouting, waving their arms, and throwing stones and branches. This behavior, known as mobbing, is still seen in primates today. It might not always succeed against a determined giant hyena pack, but it could create enough confusion and risk for a solitary cat to decide on an easier meal. Social cohesion, communication, and cooperation were the first shields humanity ever forged. The second revolutionary tool was technology itself. Sometime around 2.6 million years ago, a hominin, likely a Homo habilis or handyman, picked up one stone and deliberately struck another, creating a sharp-edged flake. This was the dawn of the Oldowan industry, the beginning of a journey that would lead to spacecraft and microchips. These first tools were crude, barely recognizable to the untrained eye as anything more than broken rocks. But they were a key that unlocked a new world of resources. These sharp flakes could not kill a giant buffalo, but they could slice through its tough hide. The heavy core stones or choppers could not bring down a saber-tooth, but they could smash open the thick leg bones of its kill to access the rich, calorie-dense marrow inside. This was the birth of confrontational scavenging. Our ancestors watched the great predators, learning their habits. After a saber-tooth made a kill and ate its fill, it might leave the carcass to rest. This was the window of opportunity. A small, coordinated band of hominins would rush in, armed with their stone tools. While some stood guard, others would work frantically, slicing off slabs of meat and, most importantly, smashing the bones. Marrow and brain tissue are among the most energy-rich foods in nature. By accessing this previously untouchable resource, our ancestors found a potent fuel source for the most energy-hungry organ of all, the developing brain. A crucial feedback loop was established. Tools allowed access to better nutrition, which in turn fueled the growth of a larger, more complex brain. A bigger brain could then devise better tools, more complex social strategies, and a greater understanding of the environment. We were not yet the mighty hunter. We were the cleverest, most tenacious scavenger on the plain. The fossil record bears witness to this transition. On ancient animal bones, paleontologists find a complex story written in scars. The deep, parallel grooves of a predator's teeth are sometimes overlaid with the fine, microscopic striations of a hominin's stone tool. This sequence tells a clear story. The cat made the kill, and our ancestors came after, butchering the leftovers. This evidence firmly places early Homo in the precarious, dangerous niche of a scavenger-forager, living in the giant's shadow, stealing from its table. As hominins evolved, becoming taller, stronger, and significantly brainier with the rise of Homo erectus, the dynamic began to shift. Erectus was a revolutionary species, the first of our ancestors to approximate modern human stature, and the first to leave Africa. Their toolkit, the Acheulean industry, was a major leap forward. It was characterized by large, symmetrical, bifacial hand axes. These were not crude choppers. They were carefully crafted, standardized tools, the product of a mind that could conceive of a form and then impose it upon a raw material. An Acheulean hand axe was a multi-tool, useful for butchery, for digging up roots and tubers, for stripping bark, and, when necessary, for defense. A well-aimed hand axe, thrown with force by a coordinated group, could be a painful and startling deterrent to a predator. The true game-changer, however, was not a tool of stone, but the harnessing of a force of nature, the mastery of fire. The first interactions with fire were likely opportunistic, using embers from natural wildfires. But at some point, perhaps 1,000,000 years ago, our ancestors learned to control it, to sustain it, and eventually, to create it at will. Fire changed everything. For the first time, hominins could carve out a sphere of safety in a hostile world. The night, once the absolute dominion of nocturnal hunters, was now held at bay by the dancing light and heat of a campfire. A circle of fire was a magical shield that predators, instinctually wary of flames, would not cross. This newfound security had profound consequences. It provided warmth against the cold nights, allowing hominins to colonize more temperate regions. It allowed for cooking, a process that not only kills parasites but also breaks down tough fibers and proteins, making food easier to digest and its nutrients more readily available. This pre-digestion outside the body may have freed up even more metabolic energy for the brain. The campfire also became a social nexus. In the safety of the firelight, the day's foraging could be processed, tools could be made, and social bonds could be strengthened. It was here, around the crackling flames, protected from the things that stalked the darkness, that language, culture, and planning could truly begin to flourish. With fire, we were no longer simply reacting to the world. We were beginning to shape it to our will. The evidence for this ancient struggle is etched into the bones of our ancestors. At sites like Swartkrans Cave in South Africa, paleontologists have found a treasure trove of hominin fossils mixed with those of predators. Many of these hominin bones show clear signs of predation. One skull of a Paranthropus, a robust Australopithecine cousin, has 2 puncture marks in its cranium that perfectly match the spacing of a leopard's lower canine teeth. It seems the leopard killed the hominin, then dragged its prize up into a tree to eat, a behavior seen in leopards today. The bones then dropped into the cave entrance below, becoming part of the fossil record. Swartkrans was not a hominin graveyard. It was a predator's larder. The sheer volume of predated hominin remains at this, and other sites paints a stark picture. For hundreds of thousands of years, we were a staple food item for the carnivores of Africa. Yet alongside this evidence of our vulnerability, we see the signs of our growing ingenuity. We find caches of stone tools. We find the charred bones of animals in ancient hearths. We see a gradual increase in the size and complexity of the brain cases in hominin skulls. The environmental pressures were immense. The filter of natural selection brutally efficient. Any group that was not vigilant enough, not cooperative enough, or not clever enough was simply wiped out, their genes removed from the human story. We are the descendants of the ones who survived. We are the children of the paranoid, the cooperative, the tool makers, and the fire starters. The giant predators of the Pleistocene did not vanish overnight. Their extinction was a long, slow process driven by a combination of factors, primarily vast climatic shifts and eventually competition from the very creature that was once their prey. As hominins, now evolving into Neanderthals, Denisovans, and eventually Homo sapiens, became more technologically advanced and socially complex, the tables began to turn. The development of sophisticated hunting weapons, like wooden spears with fire-hardened or stone tips, changed the balance of power. The hunter was becoming the hunted. Confrontational scavenging gave way to coordinated active hunting. A group of organized early humans, armed with spears and an intricate knowledge of the landscape, could systematically bring down even the largest prey. They could also now effectively defend themselves, driving away the great cats and hyenas that had terrorized their ancestors for millennia. The world our more immediate ancestors inherited was one where the giants were in decline. The colossal cave bears, the saber-toothed cats, and the giant hyenas all faded into extinction, leaving behind only their fossilized bones and the genetic memory of fear in our DNA. That deep, instinctual unease we feel in the dark, the startled response to a sudden noise in the undergrowth, the need to seek shelter and security at night, these are the psychological echoes of a million years spent as prey. Our deepest fears are a legacy from a time when the world was a much larger and far more dangerous place. The monsters were real, and they were the crucible in which our humanity was forged. The courage, ingenuity, and unity required to survive in the age of giants are the very qualities that propelled us forward. We were not born rulers of this planet. That title was earned, generation by generation, in a desperate struggle for survival against the titans of a lost world. Our intelligence is a predator avoidance strategy. Our technology is a shield. Our communities are a fortress. We look up at the stars from a planet we now dominate, but we do so with brains that were sculpted by the ever-present threat of a tooth in the night. The ghosts of the great beasts walk with us still, embedded in the core of who we are, a permanent reminder of our beginnings, not as masters but as the hunted. The great reversal, from hunted to hunter. The dynamic did not shift overnight. The journey from cowering prey to dominant hunter was a slow, grueling arms race played out over hundreds of thousands of years, a testament to the power of the evolving mind over brute strength. The key players in this grand reversal were the later members of the Homo genus, the robust Neanderthals of Eurasia, and our own direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, who emerged from Africa. They did not simply improve upon the tools of their predecessors, they reinvented the very concept of the hunt. Neanderthals, for instance, were apex predators of a caliber the world had never before seen in a primate. Their stocky, powerful builds were adaptations to the cold climates of Ice Age Europe, but they also made them formidable close-quarters combatants. Archaeological evidence, such as the famous Schöningen spears from Germany, beautifully balanced, fire-hardened U-shafts dating back 300,000 years, shows they were not just throwing rocks. These were sophisticated thrusting spears designed to be used up close. To hunt a woolly rhinoceros or a giant cave bear with such a weapon required immense courage, coordination, and physical strength. An analysis of Neanderthal skeletal remains reveals a startling pattern of traumatic injury, particularly to the head, neck, and upper body. This pattern is remarkably similar to one group of modern humans, professional rodeo riders. This suggests a life of regular, violent, close-range encounters with massive and dangerous animals. Neanderthals were not scavenging the kills of saber-toothed cats. They were confronting the megafauna on their own terms and winning. Then came the arrival of Homo sapiens and what is often called the Upper Paleolithic Revolution. This was not just a change in tool design, it was a quantum leap in cognitive and technological prowess. Our ancestors brought with them a new and utterly devastating innovation: efficient projectile weaponry. The spear thrower, or atlatl, was a simple but ingenious device, a lever that effectively extends the length of the throwing arm, allowing a spear or dart to be launched with far greater velocity, range, and accuracy than by hand alone. Suddenly, the hunter did not need to be within a few feet of thrashing hooves or goring tusks. They could strike from a safe distance of 20 or 30 meters. This single invention fundamentally altered the balance of risk. Later, the bow and arrow would refine this principle even further, offering rapid, silent, and deadly strikes from an even greater distance. This technological supremacy allowed Homo sapiens to hunt a wider range of prey with significantly less danger to themselves. They could outcompete and outhunt every other predator on the landscape, including perhaps their Neanderthal cousins. The great hunters of the Pleistocene, the lions and saber-tooths, were now direct rivals for food, with a creature that could kill with unparalleled efficiency from the shadows. The reign of the great carnivorous mammals was entering its twilight, the dawn of the Anthropocene. As modern humans spread out of Africa and across the globe, they entered new continents teeming with life that had no evolutionary experience with such a cunning and technologically advanced predator. This arrival often coincided with a wave of extinctions so profound it permanently altered global ecosystems. In Australia, which humans reached around 65,000 years ago, giants such as the wombat-like Diprotodon, the giant short-faced kangaroo Procoptodon, and the massive monitor lizard Megalania vanished. In North and South America, colonized much later around 15,000 years ago, the extinctions were even more dramatic. The continent lost its mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, American lions, and short-faced bears within a geological blink of an eye. This pattern forms the basis of the overkill hypothesis, the theory that human hunting was the primary driver of these late Pleistocene megafaunal extinctions. The argument is compelling, the timing fits, and the logic is sound. An invasive predator, armed with lethal technology and organized social hunting strategies, could easily have decimated populations of large, slow-reproducing animals. However, the story is likely more complex. The end of the Pleistocene was also a time of rapid and dramatic climate change, as the last great ice age came to a close. Warming temperatures, shifting vegetation zones, and changing rainfall patterns placed enormous stress on megafaunal populations already finely tuned to ice age conditions. It is most probable that the extinction was not a case of either climate or humans, but a deadly synergy of both. Climate change weakened the populations, fragmented their habitats, and stressed their food supplies. Then the arrival of hyper-effective human hunters provided the final, fatal blow from which they could not recover. The prey had become a planetary force, capable of wiping its former tormentors from the face of the earth. We had not just conquered the giants, we had inherited their world by erasing them from it. The ghosts in our minds. The giants are gone, but they are not forgotten. Their legacy endures not in stone or fossil, but in the very wiring of our brains and the fabric of our culture. The millions of years spent as a vulnerable prey species left an indelible mark on the human psyche. We are by nature a creature of anxieties, primed by evolution to see danger in the shadows and threat in the unknown. That shiver down your spine when you hear an unfamiliar noise at night, that primal fear of the dark, these are not irrational quirks of modern life. They are ancient survival instincts, the echoes of a time when the darkness was filled with eyes and teeth, and survival depended on being the most paranoid ape on the savanna. This legacy manifests in subtle ways. The phenomenon of pareidolia, our tendency to perceive meaningful patterns like faces in random arrangements of clouds or wood grain, may be a byproduct of a brain hardwired to detect predators. It was far better for an ancestor to mistakenly see a face in the leaves and be wrong than to fail to see a leopard's face and be dead. Our most common phobias, spiders, snakes, heights, are often directed at threats that were grave and immediate dangers to our arboreal and savanna-dwelling ancestors. Even our aesthetic preferences seem rooted in this deep history. The savanna hypothesis proposes that the reason many humans find landscapes of open grassland, scattered trees, and visible water sources so pleasing is because this was the ideal environment for early hominins. It offered the prospect of food and water, along with a clear line of sight to spot approaching danger and clumps of trees for a quick escape. Our modern love for a park or a beautiful vista is a subconscious appreciation for a landscape that whispers safety to the most ancient parts of our brain. Conclusion: forged in fear, the story of human evolution is often told as a triumphant march of progress, of an ever-improving intellect conquering the natural world. But this narrative is incomplete. It omits the most crucial motivating factor: fear. Our humanity was not a gift bestowed upon us. It was a defense mechanism, hammered into shape on the anvil of predation. We are intelligent, not because we were destined to be, but because the hominins who couldn't outsmart a Homo therium were eaten. We are cooperative not purely out of altruism, but because the groups that couldn't unite to fend off a giant hyena clan were scattered and destroyed. Our technology, from the first stone flake to the digital wonders of today, is the ultimate expression of the soft, slow creature's desperate need to overcome its physical frailty. We ventured out of the forests and onto the savanna, a small and fragile primate in a world ruled by colossal beasts of prey. For millions of years we were the hunted. We lived in the shadow of saber-toothed cats, fled from giant hyenas, and were snatched from the sky by monstrous eagles. This constant, grinding pressure forced us down a unique evolutionary path. It selected for bigger brains, for social cohesion, for the ability to plan, communicate, and innovate. The terror of the Pleistocene was the furnace in which our species was forged. Today, we stand as the undisputed apex predator of planet Earth, the single greatest influence on its biosphere. We have cleared the monsters from the landscape, and in doing so, we have come to forget the lessons they taught us. But the ghosts of these ancient giants remain. They are in our folklore, in our instinctual fears, and in the cognitive toolkit we use to navigate our complex modern world. To truly understand who we are, we must look back to the dawn of our consciousness and recognize the profound truth of our origins. We are the children of the prey, the descendants of the survivors. We walk the earth as masters, but we do so with the heart and mind of the eternally hunted.